Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, TEDxKazimierz Facebook Live audience, and also later the Project Kazimierz podcast audience, because this content is being recorded once and distributed by many means. And today we've got a very special guest, Mark Sylvester. Mark, could you say hello to everyone?
Hey, everybody, how you doing?
And maybe introduce yourself.
So I'm Mark Sylvester. I'm the organizer and executive producer of TEDxSantaBarbara. I'm also the host of a TEDx organizers podcast called Hacking the Red Circle. And as of last year, I can officially now, after 25 years of going to TED, can say I'm a TED speaker. So I got to do a talk at TEDxFargo with Greg Teveen last summer in 2018.
Congratulations on the TEDx. I think you probably meant you're a TEDx speaker rather than TED speaker because you're aware of the distinction.
That's true. It's interesting. You know this as an organizer that we've had 85 speakers on our stage in Santa Barbara, and not one of them says they gave a TEDx talk. 100% of them gave a TED talk. So it's kind of interesting, and I think I've adopted that. But You're absolutely right. It was a TEDx talk.
Okay, for those of you who are watching on Facebook, either now or later, I'm posting links underneath on the Facebook page to Mark's talk, and we'll be doing this as we go along. But just in case anyone wants to look at it on screen, that's a link to a link is appearing on screen, and that's also going on the Facebook page. And if from time to time I seem a bit distracted, that's because I'm multitasking. I don't have a producer. But the reason why I originally contacted you, Mark, is that in 6 days' time we've got a new TEDxKazimierzAdventure coming up, which is our volunteer appreciation event. The purpose of that event is that we like to let the volunteers here in Kazimierz, in Krakow, know that we appreciate what they're doing. Very often they're working, they're not necessarily being the center of attention, and the event is for them. It gives them a chance to meet volunteers in other organizations than the one they work in. It gives them a chance to meet TED and TEDx fans, people part of the TEDxKazimierz community. We also let them showcase their volunteering initiatives if they want to, so they get 1 or 2 minutes just to say who they are and what they do and why they do it. And so it can be a kind of recruitment and exercise. And I thought it might be an opportunity for you to say, because obviously as a TEDxer, you know all about volunteering, what you think what the point of volunteering is. Why is it a good idea for people who are watching this who maybe don't know so much about it to think about volunteering as something that's important to them, maybe the role of volunteering in your life?
Well, first off, thank you very much for inviting me to talk to your crew. Speaking to the TEDxKazimierz folks and the volunteers, I'm thrilled that you have this entire day that's all about you. You are the lifeblood of our organization. We could not do what we do without you. You are everything to us. The thing that's wonderful about the TEDx movement is that it is 100% volunteer. Richard volunteers, I volunteer. Everybody on all of the teams, 4,000 events worldwide, all volunteer, because we want to create an atmosphere and an event and an experience for both the speakers and the attendees, that when that speaker steps into the red circle and gives their talk and launches their idea, that idea will find fertile soil and be able to be spread and acted upon. And one sentence can change someone's life. So you're a part of something that's so much bigger than yourself. And just on behalf of all the volunteers and myself included, thank you so much for stepping up and being a part of it. And Richard, I call this, one of the things I like about volunteers is I say aces in their places. So I want to look at each person, what their superpower is, and how to put that to use in the very best way possible, whether it's being on a core team or it's being on the week of the event or the day of event, or just standing at the door greeting people and making sure they have a smile on their face?
Okay, just to clarify, the event we're running, the TEDxKazimierzAdventure, is not just for TEDxKazimierz. Firstly, it's an evening event. It starts at 6 in the evening. It's not all day because a lot of people are working. But this is an event for all volunteers. So it's the TEDxKazimierzAdventure. It's not a licensed TEDx event. But it's organized by me, the license holder.
Right,
and
right.
The idea is to reach out to. We've done it together with local volunteer coordination bodies here in our region. So we partnered with something called Małopolskie Centrum Wolontariat, which means the Southern Poland Volunteering Center, which coordinates volunteer activities. The purpose is to have a shout out and to give access to our platform and distribution volunteers from different organizations. So we're appreciating all volunteers, not just TEDx volunteers. But that doesn't mean we don't appreciate our TEDx volunteers, of course.
Of course.
And but the other thing is what I'm going to do now is I know you already did it once, but I'm hoping that I can use my or someone in my team's video production skills to make a very short video that we will play at the event as opposed to going out now. So just bear with me while I pull your name. I'm going to put your job title up on screen, which I'm going to put Mark Sylvester, executive producer, TEDxSantaBarbara. And then you're going to say in about 30 seconds, as we did with the people, as I told you, the people from TEDxCapeTown, just saying, greetings, thank you so much for being here. We hope you have a fantastic, and greetings from where you are. So I'm going to try and do it again in 30 seconds starting now.
Well, greetings to everyone from TEDxKazimierz. This is Mark Sylvester. I'm the executive producer of TEDxSantaBarbara on the other side of the world. And I want to thank you so much for being a volunteer. And I wish you the best of luck this evening and have a great time. Greetings from sunny Southern California.
That was perfect. That's exactly what I want. So that's one thing. And I think now we've done that, I think we first met at a TED summit in Banff in Canada, I think in 2016.
That's correct.
And well, we have quite a lot in common, although one of the great things about going to TEDx organizer events is you discover people from different parts of the world who are very similar to you when you get together. But in our home communities, we're not exactly normal people when we get together. We also did a pre-event. You were very involved in a pre-event we did in New York City before the TED Fest. I think you were there at that. And so, and you have a podcast. So apart from our TEDx, I think we could call it service. We both do this as a way we try to contribute to the community. We have other things we have in common. But if someone watching this doesn't really get the TEDx idea, and this could be our podcast audience, because our podcast audience isn't so focused on TEDx, although as you can imagine, they hear about it quite often. What would you say the secret source of TEDx movement or TEDx is for you, like 1 or 2 or 3 major benefits that you think anyone anywhere on the planet listening to this could get out of getting engaged with TED and TEDx?
For me, I've been going to TED for over 25 years, started going in Monterey, then followed to Long Beach, then to Vancouver. In 2010, when we had the opportunity to do a TEDx in our hometown here in Santa Barbara, my wife and I jumped at that. So we've been doing that now for, 9 years. The appeal for TED, and what I told my wife when I met her 15 years ago, I said, there's this thing I do every year, which is a vacation for my brain. It's called TED. And back in the day, the event was invitation only, and there were about 900 people in Monterey. And you were surrounded by the most amazing people you would ever contact in your life. And I would say that probably 99% of the people that are watching this video now, their experience of TED and TEDx is through a video. And the difference of seeing one video of, some 12 to 18 minutes long, which is usually very well produced and very well executed and very interesting. Imagine being in an environment with people watching 40 to 60 to 70 talks live, and having had the curator narrate and curate a thread that went through the whole day. So each talk, while they're very diverse, there is a continuity of thinking in various sessions and through the whole day. So attending a TED event for a day is so dramatically different. I love watching the people's expressions at our events. And here, Richard, what's interesting is there's a thing called TED Live, which is where organizers like us, like you and I, can simulcast the main TED event from Vancouver. And we'll have a couple of hundred people sitting watching that live stream for an entire day. And they've never seen, I call it free range TED, but they've never seen it the unproduced video. So to see the introductions, to see the foibles, to see the missed lines, everybody thinks that the TED speaker is this perfect, pristine, my wife calls it the Olympics of storytelling. Well, guess what? We're all humans and everybody makes mistakes, but things get edited. So going to an event live is actually very transformational.
Absolutely. And one thing that I experienced, I was first involved in a TEDxKrazimierz in 2010, where in fact the curator of TEDx Youth at Kazimierz, who I was telling her about a speaker I discovered about from your TEDx called Chloe Howard, because
yes.
We'll talk about her in a moment, but she was asking, because she's had an application to speak from someone from my team, from the main TEDxKazimierz team, and she was saying, can a team member speak? And the TED rules are very explicitly organizers cannot speak, but the person from my team who's applied to speak isn't an organizer of the youth event. But I was but back in the day in the TEDxKazimierz, in the TEDx Krakow team, I wasn't the curator, and the guy running it, Paul Klipp, was the first-time TEDxer. So I ended up speaking at a TEDx. I was my first experience of a TEDx was as a speaker, as opposed to being an organizer. And one of the things that Chris Anderson did when I first went to TED Global in 2011, was he came out at the beginning, before the thing had actually got underway. There's this huge auditorium, the Edinburgh International Conference Centre, I guess around 1,300 people in the room. It was big, and it was completely different scale to anything I'd been at before. And obviously we're all pretty excited, and it's absolutely packed. There are lots of things that TED do that we learn to do, like having very dramatic music as you walk in, taping off the back 70% of the seats, so you're forced to front fill the theater, and it's extremely exciting. You feel you're moving into, I call it, intellectual showbiz. And then he walked out and he said, now before we start, remember that our speakers are all of them won't have slept well, very, very well last night. Many of them may not have slept much in the last week. Some of them have been sleeping badly for months. And even the most experienced of them and the most well-known are going to be pretty nervous, because it's a very demanding thing. Imagine you were about to give your TED talk. Then he said, luckily for them, the TED audience is the most positive and supportive and open-minded, generous audience you can possibly imagine. So if they stumble, and if they grind to a halt or they forget their lines, bring them back with a round of applause and let them feel your positivity. And you could feel like 1,300 people nodding to themselves and thinking, yes, we are part of this community. And I've copy pasted that into my TEDx events. I think a lot of people who show up to a TEDx think it's going to be TED, and as you say, they don't realize that the TED talks they see online the polished final version, not the raw content. And that business of managing expectations, like I call it the sort of group brainwashing, where you basically you say to people, you make people realize that, you know, if they're showing up with a crossed arms, impress me attitude, that's what I'm trying to delete. I'm trying to get rid of. I say you have to come to this thinking not what am I going to get, but how can I contribute? And also then that brings to the whole audience experience thing, which where we've been extremely focused on in TEDxKazimierz right from the start. And maybe you could reflect a bit on what audience experience means, participant experience, what that means to you from your side of the Atlantic.
What's interesting, you know, as a producer, my wife is a speaker coach. She's coached over 300 speakers around the world. In fact, if you want to post the link, strategicsamurai.com, we put up free speaker videos for anybody who's getting ready to do a TED Talk. We have over 100 5-minute videos up there on everything from memorization to rehearsal to how do you develop your core idea, all of those things. Well, she and I work.
Mark, I'm just going to cut you off there. Sorry. Did you say Speaker Samurai?
Strategic Samurai.
Strategic Samurai. I think it's better to pause you and lose a bit of the fluency than samurai. I'm just wondering if I can even spell samurai.
It's A-M-U-R-A-I.
Kimberly Weil, speaker coach. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, it's going up on the screen in just a moment. And this is your wife, did you say?
So yeah, so my wife is one of the top speaker coaches in the country. She's doing speaker coaching all the time. In fact, in a few hours from now, we're going into a 2.5-day retreat with 5 people who've already been on the TEDx stage and now work with us on how to take that idea up to the next level. So we have this saying that everything that happens inside the red circle is her job and everything outside the red circle is my job. And together what we do is conspire to make sure that, as I said earlier, when someone steps into the circle, they're completely ready to go. And a big part of that is the audience. As you were saying earlier, the audience experience. We see the audience as a big part of that conversation that the speaker is having energetically, meaning that it's the hardest part of the talk is the first minute. They step out there, as you quoted Chris so eloquently. They're nervous. They're trying to remember to stick their landing, so to speak, to stay with the Olympic metaphor, and to be able to really nail the that first minute. And it's when they get the first audience reaction, whether it's a laugh or a knowing nod, or to your point, the person who has their arms crossed and it's like, okay, impress me. Once you feel the audience start to lean into you and to your talk and to pay attention, that's when the magic happens. And we see it all the time. And we coach our speakers to be very cognizant of that. We actually, Richard, you'll love this. We're improvisational comics, both Kimberly and I. And so we do improv 3 nights a week here in Santa Barbara. Mostly to improve our business communication capability, but we also bring improv training to our speakers so they can learn how to be very fluid and have a flow and a conversation with the audience. And again, energetically. I'm thinking of one speaker, Tim Bauer, who was very funny, but he did not know he was funny. He was not intentionally cracking jokes. He was just, his natural demeanor and his self-deprecating humor was very, very endearing. The audience fell in love with him, and you could see him soften and relax and just step into that talk, and it was spectacular. And so as an audience member, sitting there and watching someone give the talk of their life and to be a part of the thing that gives them the energy back to continue and to be powerful and positive, because there's, as you know, as an organizer, there's two audiences for this talk. The primary audience, with no disrespect to the live audience, is YouTube, because these talks go on and live to change thousands of people's lives. I mean, that's why we do what we're doing. We're here to make a difference. So the primary audience is them. But without a live audience, you don't have the energy that you need for the speaker to really come alive. And that is, I think, the magic of this platform is, and I think it's one of the principal differences between this type of talk and any other kind of talk. Normally, 99% of the time when someone gives a talk, it's not being recorded. And if it is, no one's ever going to watch it. And in this case, everyone knows, not everyone, but everyone who walks onto the TED stage has seen multiple TED Talks, and they know that the bar is set very, very high. And they don't want to disappoint you as the organizer. They don't want to disappoint the audience. They don't want to disappoint themselves. They've most of them put in upwards of 6 months of work in crafting the very best 12, 15, 18 minutes they can, so that the whole purpose is to push this idea out into the universe and have it gain traction. And everything needs to come together for that to happen perfectly.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think the sort of the difference between the online audience and the face-to-face audience is very interesting. And in terms of, and this is an experience that you've had and I've had, and every TEDx organizer has had, is the importance of clarifying that a TEDx talk is about the idea first and foremost, not the person. And we have an idea submission form, not a speaker. And every TEDx organizer you have to get Hank to speak. He's such a great speaker. You say, terrific. What will he talk about? He's saying, whatever you want. And you say, no, this isn't right. We're looking for great ideas. And typically the process is, well, what's the idea? Why do you care about your idea? Why should the audience care about their idea? Why are you the right person? Why is now the right time? And what, if any, are the calls for action? That kind of framework. I find there's tremendous impact on the other things I do, that the knowledge I've got in terms of event organization and helping focus on the ideas within talks transfers into so many other walks of life. And you mentioned that sort of bringing of people together, which leads into a couple of things. One is you talked about improv comedy and how you do that to improve your business skills. What skills do you think, or competencies do you think that you've got from TED that impact on other areas of your life, or TED and TEDx on other areas of life? And after a couple of minutes on that, perhaps we could move on to talk about your podcast.
So the being around TED, let's say the first 10 years was as an attendee. I learned that when I would look at the agenda, it was always a great anticipation to see who was going to come speak. In the early days, there was quite a lot of celebrity, and I don't mean celebrity entertainment, but big thinkers that is like really excited to see them. And that's when it was the speaker first, idea second. And now under Chris Anderson's tutelage and curation, it's idea first, speaker second. But what would happen was I would be so excited only because I knew that of the 70 talks, I might have some knowledge of 5 or 6 of the thematic areas, and mostly I didn't know what was coming. And that in itself was, for me, I'm intellectually very curious, and I stray outside of my domain of expertise constantly. And I think TED, I think 25 years, that's a muscle that I have exercised a lot, which is this opening yourself up to the possibility that A, you're going to learn something, B, it's going to be interesting. C, you may find an opportunity to, in my case, what I call lateral lessons. I'm going to learn something in one sphere that I'm going to then connect the dot into another sphere. So that's constantly happening to me. So the things I have learned in TED and then specifically in my TEDx experience have to do with collaboration, co-creation. How do you manage a volunteer workforce? I mean, for all intents and purposes, we have organizations that are existing to promote these ideas. We're pretty event-centric, yet the only thing that's different between us and any other organization that does a thing is we don't get paid. But there's money and there's timelines and there's budgets and there's to-do lists and there's marketing and graphics and branding and production and planning and promoting and partnering and all the things that make up a good group effort, which I call plan, produce, publish, promote, and partner. Those 5 Ps are evident in spades in the TEDx world, and being able to work on that, exercise that, get better at that. I'm also a martial artist, Richard. I think you know that I'm a second Dan black belt, and so one of our tenets is that everything is an opportunity to train. So this is an opportunity where we can constantly work on some aspect of our business life, and it's tremendously helped in so many ways.
Thank you for that. So, and I've also just put up on the screen and in the notes underneath, which will also be the show notes of the podcast when I put it all together, a link to the TEDx program on the TED.com website, because sometimes people think it's a very mysterious thing and how does it all work? And there is, if you've got the time to sit for a couple of hours and read through all the content on TED.com/TEDx on how it all works, it's all there. And the amount, and so many times people have said to me, hey, Richard, can you just explain how it works? And I say, well, have a look at the website. yeah, but there's so much information there. I don't have time to read all that. And he said, well, it's very hard to explain it all when the reality is actually quite complex. It's not a simple thing. But if you're an event organizer in any walk of life, you can't do a better thing than read how TED tells TEDxers to organize their events, because it's basically the handbook for almost every type of event, because TED aims much higher than most events. And when I speak at other events, I'm shocked at the lack of preparation that they expect of me compared to what a TEDx organizer expects of a TEDx. But so that's there. I want to move on to your podcast, Hacking the Red Circle, because I've been on your podcast. I've already posted a link to your talk. While we're talking, look up mine in case anyone's interested. But you were actually interviewed on your own podcast. But before you talk about your own talk, if you could perhaps explain to people what Hacking the Red Circle is, and most importantly, why you do it, that would be awesome.
Well, let's go back to what you were just saying about when you would, someone wants to know what is TEDx all about, and you point them to the website. There's 37 pages of information, and it's there for a very good reason. Most of the people who produce a TEDx event, at least their first event, have never produced an event before. They have fallen in love with the TED idea. They love TED Talks, and they're moved to do something in their community. They might be a community organizer, a community activist. They're very involved. They want to give back, yet they don't really know at all what it takes to do this. So TED, in just a wonderful gesture, gives you literally every single thing you need to be able to produce an event, whether you do it by yourself or you have a whole crew that helps you. And then there's a ton of support infrastructure around that, websites, Facebook groups, downloadable stuff. It's a completely 100% open source community. So we share our sponsorship documents, our website designs, our marketing plans, our editorial calendars, our speaker guides, every single piece of the TEDx experience from an event organizer point of view is available for download. So park that and know that that's the what you do. The how you do it, that's a whole different thing, because the how you do it is, I think, best communicated from another organizer. Talking to someone else who's done it and said, oh, well, yeah, this is the whole bit about how you manage social media and make sure that you are staying within the regulations, if you will, the guidelines of how the brand is being protected. Yes, you can read that, absolutely, and you better read that. But talking to someone helps bring that to life. So what I found, first off, a couple years ago, people started saying, could we hire you to come help us coach our team and coach me, like an executive director would say, could you coach me? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could. And so a couple years ago, I started doing that. And what I found was that I knew a lot more about producing an event than I thought I did. But I don't know everything by a long shot. And I've been producing events for a very, very long time. And I thought, what would be really interesting is to take this idea of learning from one another to another level. I'm a podcast producer. I've produced 10 different shows. I think you put up marksylvester.com. They can find podcasting up there. And so I thought, what if I were to go and start a show where I talk to TEDx organizers around the world, and through a format of understanding the best practices from them, what do they do to make their TEDx unique? What surprises them? What's the TED ecosystem look like in their part of the world? All of those questions would provide a format for a conversation that would be interesting to other organizers, and we could learn from one another. Okay, well, I had the idea. I called 10 organizers that I had met over the years and then at Summit. And I said, listen, I've got this idea. What do you think? Everybody loved it. Was an instant success. I've done 70 shows are up online. I've got another 20 that are still in production. Again, this too is a volunteer effort. So it takes a while to get all. I don't have a crew who's helping get all that done. But what I found is there's tremendous value in three ways. One, to the person I'm organizing, it gives them a chance to talk about why they do what they're doing. And I think of all of these conversations as being just spectacularly illustrative of the mission, purpose, and passion that drives these organizers. Then for other organizers, I'm thinking of the Wheelers at TEDx Brisbane. This is a family-run TEDx, so mom, dad, the three kids, and when I say kids, they're 20 and 30-year-old kids, all have roles in the core team. They listen to the show as a family and take notes. They're not the only one. There are many, many teams that listen to the show, take notes, because every single show has got at least 5 different interesting ideas that like, I would like to try that on my event. And then finally, for me, I feel as if the show has become a masterclass where I'm able to learn from just these amazing humans, including yourself, Richard, around the world. I pick up stuff, and my crew knows that as I record on Tuesdays, and we have our core team meetings, typically will be on a Tuesday night, that I'm going to come in with 3 pages of ideas that I've heard from the last month's worth of speakers. And I was like, oh, we should try this and we should try that. Like, TEDx Wellington didn't know that there was a director of experience, and her whole job was just experience. Or learning from TEDx St. Louis that they have 70 activations. They have partners with 70 booths throughout the day. Or talking to John Werner at TEDx Beacon Street, where he has 400,000 people attend his TEDx adventures. That's just nuts. Just nuts. So it's the show is a really great way to communicate a big idea. Like you said, you send someone to the website, gosh, there's so much there. Well, you can listen for 45 minutes while you're doing something else and pick up all these tips and tricks from people who, as you said at the very top of the show, we have so much in common, yet we are so diverse and different as individuals in our own community.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the learnings you get from other people. I had the privilege of being able to attend and assist with TEDxCapeTown, and in their lobby, they had a stand for their community engagement team. This is great, and we don't do that in TEDxKazimierz, but next time we have a live event, an event with live speakers, we probably will. They didn't know about transcribathons, which we do to help, because obviously Polish, about a third of our content is in Polish, and it's not a global language. And there's this wonderful movement of the TEDx translator community, and Christian Apata was in our team. He also worked for TED. He's very active. So we celebrate the translator community. So there were things, they thought what we had done was great. They thought what we thought what they were doing was great. And there's just this sense of learning from each other. Plus the fact that although Chris Anderson was interviewed about TED sometimes is criticized, and the more powerful and the higher profile TED and TEDx become, the more people want to criticize things that are big and successful. It's a natural, maybe the more power you have, the more you should be scrutinized. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But he said people criticize TED and TEDx for things they've never claimed to be. And TEDx isn't everything. It's a format, a talk of up to 18 minutes where someone gives a talk for free on the most important thing they've got to say in their life, the talk of their life in up to 18 minutes. And that's a specific brief. It isn't everything. The advantage of your podcast and these interview formats is it's longer. You've got more time to explore things. It's a conversation. TEDx and TED Talks are not that. They're something else. So it's complementary to the format. It's not instead of, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's something here in the United States called the TED Radio Hour. You can get it as a podcast. It's from National Public Radio.
Mark, it's not in the United States. It's on the internet. It's everywhere.
Okay, well there you go. Most of the people it's interesting. I talk to people and they hear it on the radio on NPR. The TED Radio Hour with Guy Raz is I think it's something like 12 million listeners a week. What he does, and again, to your point of being able to dig in deeper, he'll take a topic, neuropsychology, and he'll then take 3 or 4 people who have given a talk on that and then interview them and tell this wonderful story over an hour-long period where he is able to go deeper, able to interview, because we don't do panels, we don't do interviews, someone comes up and that talk stands alone. So the before the talk where you're interviewing and kind of priming the audience for who this person is, then there's the talk, and then there's the after where you may ask a follow-up question or two where you're kind of a surrogate for the audience. All of that gets edited away. So with what Guy does, being able to dig in deeper is a big deal. Now, what people don't understand is how much it takes to actually produce one of these events at the caliber that you and I both strive for. So we're The TED brand is a premium brand in terms of premium ideas, and everything we do around the quality of production, the AV, the experience, the venue, everything we do is to try to come up as far as we can within the limited resources we have to that type of stellar production. So I think that the Hacking the Red Circle is a way for us all to learn from each other so we can all be better, again, in service of getting the ideas out there. For instance, an example, if you're not paying attention to high quality AV, remember I said earlier, primary audience is the YouTube audience. If that video isn't really good, well produced, audio is a little crackly or not well done, the viewer is going to switch off after a couple of minutes, and that idea is never going to have gotten propagated through that one person. So all of these things are done for a reason, the reason being getting the idea out there. I started last year, I did another podcast called Behind the Scenes, where I took our own community here in Santa Barbara behind the scenes of our TEDx. We talked about the speaker selection process. We talked about how we bring the theme to life in animation and our graphic and set design, how we work with partners and what the partner experience is like. Again, the whole idea is to help people understand the richness and vibrancy of the platform, and that it's not just sitting there and watching a 15-minute talk.
Yes, exactly, and I think that's so important. And I hadn't heard about the behind the scenes, and I'm just going to have a shout out, because the reason I went to TEDxCapeTown was two. One was that I'm a couch surfer, and I stayed with a very nice lady called Gill Grose with two of my children in the summer of 2017, and when we arrived there, as a couch surfer, you stay for free. Couch surfing is like a free Airbnb. You people host you for free, and you host other people for free. And it's a wonderful example of how the internet can be such a force for good. There's a reference system like on eBay, or so you can see that people have been approved by other people. So it sounds very scary and dangerous, but in fact it works extremely well. And we stayed with Jill Grose, who asked us to bring books. The reason she asked us to bring books was because she is a volunteer librarian in a primary school for kids from low and medium income families in a suburb of Cape Town, South Africa. And as I was talking to her, I said, do you know about TED and TEDx? She said, yeah, a bit. She wasn't really aware of the local TEDx community. She was aware of TED and was a TED fan. And I nominated her to go to TEDxCapeTown, and TEDxCapeTown accepted her. So I was very proud. I came from Poland to South Africa, introduced one South African to other South Africans. And when I nominated her, I didn't hear back for ages, but I thought, well, if they accept her, I might go there. But then I thought, I don't want to go to South Africa just to hear one person speak. It is a bit much, It's like, can I really justify that? So I then pitched TEDxCapeTown the idea of doing a pre-event, and when they agreed, yes, I could do a pre-event, a little like I did before the TED Fest. I then did both, so I ended up doing two things, and had a very, very nice experience there. Which again was I was going to post a shout out to her talk, but I realized that her talk's not online now, which means I can't do that. But we have this sort of sense that the TEDx community is. We try to have an ambassador on our team, although that's a new position, because we feel the value of collaborating with other TEDx's is one of the low-hanging fruit that hasn't necessarily been picked by all TEDx's, and to the extent that's good practice, we're delighted to share it. Now, I wanted to briefly talk about one of your past speakers, who Chloe, because I was telling Maya, who's our TEDx youth curator this year. It was the first time we're doing a TEDxKazimierz Youth about this, and she said that's interesting, and she'll look out for someone dealing with the topic that Chloe is talking about. But perhaps you could tell our audience a little bit about who Chloe is and how the TEDx stage changed her life.
So Chloe Howard is the daughter of a young man that I mentored when he was 20, going to art center and studying to be a designer. He's now a very, very well-known designer in the United States, Dane Howard. And about 3 years ago, I was at a beach party, and he was there with his family, and I hadn't seen his kids, and it was so great. And here's this, 15-year-old girl who had this amazing story about being born with a club foot and enduring many, many, many surgeries over her young life to get her foot to where it could be used. And there were scars from that. And she was teased mercilessly in middle school for those scars because she didn't look perfect. And her whole life had been told she was perfect by her parents. And yet in an afternoon, that was dispelled by these mean girls. Her talk has started a movement. Excuse me. She gave her talk three years ago. Yeah, 3 years ago on our stage. We invited her because we thought it was such a perfect message, and she's such a wonderful speaker. And we do a brunch after our TEDx the next day for all the speakers. It's kind of like everybody flies into town for a wedding, and then the next day, the couple has gone off to the honeymoon, and the family is left to meet and mingle and talk, and the ceremony's over. So we do the same thing with our speakers. And I said to her, Chloe, you don't know this yet, but I'm going to tell you right now that you are going to be the voice of this movement. You are going to be the person who's associated with this Stand Beautiful movement. And she just looked at me like, had no idea what that meant. Well, Richard, what happened was, as a result of the talk, she was approached by a major book publisher here in the United States. Her book came out last year. She was invited by an NGO to go and speak in 5 countries last summer or 2 summers ago. She gave 50 talks. She sat in on surgeries for club feet. She went and talked to girls' organizations, to schools in India, in the Middle East. Absolutely amazing. She's extremely articulate. I invited her 2 summers ago to come back to a garden party that we organized for our partners to talk about her experience. She had me crying. I had to come up and follow her on the stage, and I was done. She was so moving. And it was her experience that gave us this idea to do a segment we call Where Are They Now?, where we invite past speakers, 3 speakers, to come up and give a 5-minute talk on where is that idea now that it's been launched out into the universe. And she gave another brilliant talk. You can find it at TEDxSantaBarbara.com that was really quite special. So to have this young, articulate, very approachable young woman be the face of something and know that we were there to kind of launch that idea into the world is extremely gratifying and supports the purpose and mission of what we do, which is to have an impact. We want to have an impact in our community. We want an impact in the world. And Chloe was just a perfect example of that.
A book is called Stand Beautiful, is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I just found, I was Googling it while you were talking because I was sort of prepared for this. And again, apologies to my our Facebook Live viewers who may see me looking away. But we actually had one speaker, which is an exciting speaker for us because it's been the most high traffic TEDxKazimierz talk we've had by Michele Hutchison, and she's an author who we put on the TEDx stage, and her book about it's called The Happiest Kids in the World. She co-authored it with Rena Acosta, but I met them first in New York, and Poland, as with the background to the book is that she's British and her co-author is American, and they both married Dutch guys and met in Holland and were really struck by the differences between the way the Netherlands Dutch people bring up their children compared to America and the United Kingdom, and they both thought that Holland was better. And so one of them wrote a blog post which went viral, and that led to a book. And basically, it's much less overprotective. That according to the thesis of the book is that if you try less hard, you trying too hard is bad for children. The children need to be more independent, find their own way. And so that was a book that turned into a TEDx talk. And I've just looked now. Right now, we've got 158,000 views. It's one of our frustrations. We don't get as much attention online as we'd like, but certainly it's been clocking up by 5,000 a week for many weeks. And so that's in the other direction. In fact, I'll post a link to it now in the show notes. But another thing that's interesting is that we are being slammed on the comment thread. And most of the people really love it. I can just look that the number of thumbs up is 1,300. The number of thumbs down is 154. So you're always going to get some haters, but people are critical of her public speaking skills. They're critical of the fact she has a lectern. They don't know that she had a bad accident on the way. She came with a very, very sore leg, and her flight was disrupted. She had to land at a different airport. So she was in quite a sorry state by the time she arrived. Plus, the idea is the point. It's not about being a slick public speaker. It's about having a great idea. I don't know if you've got any similar experiences to share like that.
With 85 speakers, we've had a little bit of everything, including the guy who called Kimberly 3 hours before the event, and he said, "I've locked myself in my hotel room. I'm not coming." Mm-hmm. It was, he's very, very. We had to talk him down, if you will. We got him in. We've had people just physically collapse after they get backstage, and they just physically collapse because they just gave everything they could on stage. We had one guy, this is on the horror story side. We'd worked with him for 6 months. It was very challenging to get him to a place to where he had a good, cogent, concise idea. And went through rehearsal, everything was fine. Then the day of, he starts talking, and we look at each other in the booth, and we're like, "Hold it, that's not his talk. What's he doing?" And then he goes on a little bit longer, and then he starts singing some opera, which wasn't in it. I mean, none of this. We were like, "What is going on here?" And he finishes, and then and there was one point where he just stopped and was quiet for, it felt like 3 minutes, but it was actual minute. Imagine just being quiet, him just looking at the audience for a minute, trying to figure out where he was in his talk. And afterwards, I ran backstage and I go, "What the heck was that?" Well, he had a new girlfriend like within that week, and brought her with him to Santa Barbara. She had sat through his rehearsal and didn't like his talk, so got him to rewrite a talk that night. He was up all night rewriting the talk, and it was absolutely abysmal. It
sounds funny now, but it probably wasn't funny on the day, right?
It was not at all funny. I had one guy who, I want to do a show on Hacking the Red Circle that's just these horror stories, because people always just see the good stuff. But a guy who gave us his slides, they were in the wrong format, and we determined this during rehearsal. And so it got put into the right format. And in that process, the first 4 slides they were just photographs that he would go through, but the order got inverted, and that threw him off so much that he was just up in his head the whole talk. His talk was great, but after the talk, he came up into the booth and was screaming at us and refused to let the talk be published, which was kind of interesting. So it's amazing the fact that we even get these talks up there, that you have 1.34 million or 1,000 people liking them and a few not liking them. The point is you've started a conversation, and you've got people that are interacting and doing that. I hope that this conversation has been of value to you and to the listeners.
Yes, Mark, I appreciate the time. We arranged it at very short notice. Thank you so much. Project Kazimierz listeners, if there's one other podcast you should listen to if you're interested in TED and TEDx, check out Hacking the Red Circle and the TED Radio Hour, because if you're a podcast fan, you'll enjoy that. Mark, thank you so much for doing your bit to promote our volunteer appreciation event on January the 24th in Hevre in Krakow in Poland, and I believe we're going to see each other for the TED Summit.
Yes, we are.
Which is in July 2019. So just in a almost literally 6 months from today. And maybe we can do a pre-event or something before then. I'd love to. I know that you're a very busy man. I won't. What's the word? I won't take up more of our listeners' time by talking about other things that we can potentially work on together. But I hope for those of you listening around the world, they can feel the warmth of the TEDx global community. And so it's goodbye from Mark in California and from Richard in Krakow in Poland.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Richard.